The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Dr. Do-Reynoso, Santa Barbara County Public Health Director. Vaughn, thank you so much for being with us today. Can't wait to share your story or have you share your story in terms of your role as Public Health Director. And one of the things that we want to do through this show is really talk about career pathways, how an individual got to where they are today. And so what we'd like to do is start from the very beginning. Your story is so fascinating and wonderful in terms of where you started. So talk about where you were born and brought up.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I was born in Vietnam, and I came to the U.S. in 1975 at the end of the Vietnam War. And so I recall being a refugee and living in Guam until we were sponsored by a family in Junction City, Kansas. And and you know what was really neat is that I took my daughter to finish her doctorate work 2 summers ago, and I got to visit Junction City, Kansas. So that was really neat to retrace my steps.
Wow. How long were you there in Junction City?
So
the first time
we were there for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I had come to the U.S. with my older sister and her husband and daughter. Okay. And so my brother-in-law couldn't find a job in Kansas, so we moved to Ohio and lived there for about 6 months. And then we heard about this Mecca for Vietnamese refugees in California. And so my brother-in-law and my sister packed up the family, and we made it out to Orange County, where I attended 5th grade and stayed until I finished high school.
Wow, that is incredible. So I'd love to linger here for just a moment, because when I hear about your childhood experiences, I think that there are individuals, many who are viewing the show today or live here in this community, who might identify with this story of moving to a place that's just very different from where they were born and raised, not being with their parents. I think you've described it in the past as being a foster youth, not having your parents there. Not sure if you were an English learner or if you knew English before coming, but there's the language barriers as well. So I just pause on the fact that your story is so unique to you, but yet perhaps identifiable with those in our community that have similar kinds of experiences too.
Yeah, and you know, I definitely, and I think that's a huge part of who I am as a professional, because I've lived through that. So absolutely, when I landed in Junction City, did not speak one word of English. And as a 9-year-old, I had to start in 1st grade. Wow. And so had I lived in Vietnam, I would have started 3rd grade.
Right.
And so being a 9-year-old in 1st grade was really challenging. And having to learn English, I remember going to ESL classes and having to learn all of that, and the struggle of landing in a community that's maybe not as familiar with my culture and background or the context of how I got to Junction City. But I want to say that it takes a village.
Sure.
So I recall, you know, I grew up in Vietnam where it's tropical, and walked to school one day not really understanding snow falling and being stuck in snow and standing there and saying, okay, what do I do? And it was a stranger pulling over and knowing I probably looked terrified, and stopping and picking me up and taking me to school. And then, it was another neighbor who gave me snow boots and all of that. So learning English, settling in a community that is so foreign, so different without my parents was very difficult, actually without all of my family members. So I came to the U.S. with my sister, but I left behind my parents and the rest of my siblings.
Wow.
So I'm 7th of 9. And so only 2 of us came in 75.
Wow. Vaughn, I so appreciate that experience that you shared, and we could go into it for so long, I know, because as you said, it really impacts you as a person as to who you are and the leader that you are and the community that we serve. Yeah, it's really important, and an important part of who you are. The differences in terms of Vietnam and the United States, but then Kansas to Ohio to Orange County. Talk about all of those differences too. You said that there was an identified Mecca, so to speak, a myth at the time. When you went to Orange County, was it true?
It was true.
Was it true?
It was true.
Did it feel good?
It felt great because no snow.
Yes.
Balmy weather year-round, just like Vietnam somewhat, and other Vietnamese people. And so when my sister and brother-in-law settled us in Orange County, immediately they had a network of other Vietnamese refugees who had settled there prior. And so there was a network that assisted us as a family in getting jobs, in getting a place to live, and all the services.
That's great. And something we'll talk about in a moment, but just wanted to say as we're on this subject, but the fact that you just shared with us the beginnings of your childhood, and then fast forward to now where you have a PhD, and you just talked about taking your daughter to, I think, finish her PhD program. That is remarkable and should be absolutely recognized and commended and just treasured as far as a leader that you are. Absolutely, absolutely. Something that you have said before that I've heard is about education, and education being really a ticket to a world beyond what you experience. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that being an immigrant to the U.S., so we gave up a whole lot. Family, resources, social standing. And I recall growing up in Orange County, something my sister always said to me was, they can take everything away from you, but they can't take what's up here, right? And so she was probably one of the most consistent person that said, pursue your education. So I did my high school in Orange County, and struggled really against the perception that because I didn't have a family, because I didn't have resources, college was not attainable. And really, I remembered this program. I don't know if they still have a program like this. It was called Bridge, Upward Bound Bridge.
Yes, there is that program.
Yes, that's the program that took me as an 8th grader to UCI and said, spend a week here, and this is what college is like. And then explaining the A, back then it was the A through F. Is it still through?
G.
Okay, G, yeah.
They added one more.
Right. And then really having that mentor assigned to me, going and being there for me throughout high school, and then helping me apply to college. And so, and it's so true. The doors open once I received my bachelor's, once I received my master's, once I received my doctorate. And it is true, education does open the doors to other opportunities.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Share with us, the viewers and myself, where you received, or earned, I should say, your bachelor's, master's, and doctorate.
So this is not what I would recommend in choosing college.
Okay.
But also, I struggled, growing up in Orange County, I struggled against being stereotyped as a Vietnamese immigrant. And this is like the box that you will stay in. And so I whipped out a map and said, I want to go to college, but somewhere that I can afford, that I can get scholarships to go. So it had to be in California. And I literally found the university that I could attend that was the farthest from Orange
Ah,
County.
yes.
So didn't know anything about UC Santa Cruz until I got there and said, oh my goodness, what have I done? It was
What is a banana slug and where am I?
It was so foreign to Orange County, right? This beautiful redwoods vacation type of environment.
Yes.
So I was in for another giant culture shock, definitely.
You know what, Vaughn, given the story that you shared, we get it. I think all of us hear you say, you know what, I wanted to be a little different out, and you didn't want to be boxed in.
No.
So you were not. What did you major in Santa Cruz?
I majored in biology. I was pre-med. Okay. And at least for the first 2 years. And then said, oh, these folks are so boring. I mean, they've got their life planned out. And of course, I wanted to be a doctor. And so I took on a minor, history, and had a lot of fun.
Good.
And so I did biology and history and then graduated. But in my junior year, met a phenomenal professor, Linda Berthold, and she said, why do you want to go to med school? You can be so much more. Consider public health.
Wow.
And so I said, well, okay, I'm young. I can do this. So that's, I applied to Berkeley and did my MPH at Berkeley.
Wow. Pivotal moment right
exactly.
there. And just so we can close that loop, where did you end up, where did you receive or earn your PhD?
At UC Merced.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So we have that trajectory there. And so a moment ago you talked about public health. And so it sounds like as a junior, you decided, and then at Berkeley definitely pursued a career as in public health and public service. So what was it about that idea, that pivotal moment that you said, yes, that's for me?
You know, I think when I was a undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, I did a lot of volunteer work in the clinic. It was, at that time, there was a community clinic called Westside. And so I worked through there, and then I was a CNA in home health. So I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. So attending Dr. Berchthold's class really opened my eyes to the policy component of healthcare. And so rather than dealing or problem solving on an individual basis, I had the opportunity, if I went into public health, to deal with the issues from a systems perspective, from a policy, and that was so much more attractive to me because as she said back then, you don't want to get stuck in a hamster wheel. You want to impact change, and public health was the venue that could make it happen. So that's what got me into public health. But my first job out of Berkeley was at a community health center in Oakland, and it was true. It was, I could do so much more to impact this community, and I've never looked back because I saw it from a systems perspective, the opportunity to transform, to address an issue once and for all, and you just need to go back and tweak it a little bit.
That's great. So we're fortunate to have you as our Santa Barbara County Public Health Director. Before coming here in 2017, you were the Public Health Director in Madera County,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a couple of steps backwards, but how did you get to Santa Barbara County as the Public Health Director? What were some of the roles that you played before?
So in Madera County, I was the Public Health Director. So before that, I was the Assistant Public Health Director, and I was recruited from Tulare County with that purpose for succession planning with the Madera County Public Health Department.
I see.
And so I was looking for a position to utilize my PhD and my experience, and actually was considering staying around in the Central Valley just because I knew that it was an area of need. And then the job in Santa Barbara opened up, and I jumped at the chance because it's a dream job. So our public health department here is an integrated department where we have the clinics and we have community health. So it's an opportunity to look at policy as well as individual health.
That's fantastic. Dream job and perfect person to fill the role for sure. And for if we can stop for just a moment and talk again about public health here, Santa Barbara County Public Health Department and its mission and goals for a moment, for those who aren't as familiar. You just talked about some of the services, but if you could say again, if someone were watching or turning on the TV now, what is the mission or the goals of the Public Health Department?
Sure. So our purpose, why we exist, is really to protect the health of every resident in Santa Barbara County. And we do that by preventing disease. We do that by promoting healthy lifestyles. And we do that by ensuring that the environment in which every member of our community lives is healthy, is safe.
Great, thank you. That's I really appreciate that. It's a very succinct summary of what all that you do. I know there's so many different programs and services that you offer, and you and your team. One of the ways that the community saw public health up front, maybe for some residents for the first time and some repeated but in a different way, happened when actually you had just moved here, I think, to Santa Barbara County. Right after that, we experienced the Thomas Fire and then the subsequent mud flows, and we saw the public health really have a front, outward-facing community message for everybody. So from your perspective as the Director of Public Health, but also having just been in a different county and coming into Santa Barbara County, just share with us some of what you took away, some of the lessons learned, just some of the perspective that only you could have had during that time.
4 months into the job, Thomas Fire happened. And then, as you said, within 4 weeks, we had the debris flow. My takeaway, it was when we were in the midst of handling the disaster, first the recovery, and then the cleanup. I think what I walked away was, I have an incredible team in my department. I was there on the weekends and they were there. I would show up at 12:30 a.m. and they were there. They had been there 24/7. So, and tirelessly working. And so in our department, we have an ops center, if you will. And it was just everyone being around the table, problem solving so that we can maintain health and we can protect our community. It was astounding. And the other thing, so other than the fact that I have an incredible high-performing team, was the fact that the community was there to help. We could have not done all that we needed to do, from rescuing animals to looking at communities and hazardous waste in the homes. We couldn't have done any of that without partners stepping up and saying, how can we help? Do you need help staffing the shelters? Do you need help fostering the animals? Do you need us to care for anything? Do you need help? Can we come and take care of you? And so what I was so impressed with was, wow, we have a community that is so resourced and compassionate and caring. The other thing was that not only did it give us an opportunity to really showcase our capacity to care for our community, it also showcased the complexity of public health as a field, as a department. We had staff from North County calling and saying, well, we know you've been working 24/7. We will do the double shift. We will come down and take a little bit off of you. And it was just the whole department in every community pulling together. And so that's an astounding asset to have.
Absolutely. Vaughn, I'm so glad that we paused here for you to share your perspective. I don't think anybody would have known that without, we wouldn't have had that lens into the organization or the complexities of the system that was providing so much support to the community. As a recipient, on the education side, we had public health with us every step of the way. from the moment ash was falling in the sky to, for every moment, and of course the mud flows and aftermath there. So our appreciation was absolutely to the height that I think it needed to be, but the understanding might not have been there as far as the complexity. So really appreciate that perspective.
I just, again, am so humbled and proud of the professionals I have in my department. Not only do they have the technical expertise to be that resource to education, to homeowners, to pet owners, but they also have a big heart. And it went on for months.
Yes.
And no complaints.
Right.
We're here to serve, and we take it seriously.
Yeah, clearly, and we are so appreciative, truly. One thing you mentioned a moment ago had to do with the community and partnerships, and I know that when you started, when you first started, you were talking about leveraging, really maximizing the incredible community partners that we have, and I think you've begun and are doing just that. Just a couple examples we can highlight, but you're welcome to share others too, but I know you focused a lot on carpinteria. Say a little bit about what it is that you're working on there.
Sure. So when I came, carpinteria was reeling from a few suicides in the community, and they reached out to the public health department through the board and said, "Hey, you know what? We know that there are help for severely mentally ill, but what about the young people? What about community members who fall into that area where they need a safe place to get help?" And so I heard that and convened. HopeNet was the group that came and shared the need with us. So I said, why not? We have a health center in Carpinteria. Why not be the convener of the community? And so invited all the service providers who were based out of Santa Barbara and really posed this question: what will it take for us to partner with public health convening and creating that space for CARP members to come and receive that needed help? And so we have the CARP Connect, which we had a grand opening a couple weeks ago. And so we have the space the city of CARP donated, so that's partnership. They donated to us, and we were able to cobble together different monies. And so we have a pretty nice, warm, inviting space for community members to come, and we have Santa Barbara-based service providers coming into that space to provide the service so that CARP residents wouldn't have to travel all the way to Ventura or up to Santa Barbara to receive that those services. So it's doable, and we would not been able to do it had it been just us, but with the partners that we were able to say, hey, come to the table, help us do this. We were able to create this wonderful pilot, if you will, that could be replicated in other isolated communities.
Something else we talked about was a real interest or need to support mental wellness for our youth. And so do you want to share a little bit about some of the work that you've seen and recognized that's happening around the county? So
education, your world. I am very impressed that Santa Barbara Unified is committed to ACEs, and I know that ACEs screening is being rolled out in the elementary schools and looking at the reach, and so is CARP. And so I think that, it's a grave concern to me in public health, because I think that mental wellness is often not acknowledged as a public health concern, and that's so critical, that affects everything. And I like to think of it as you could be physically well, but if you are not mentally well, that's a huge barrier, right? While when you're physically ill, people can see those symptoms and they can treat those symptoms. But sometimes when you're just not feeling in a good space, you don't get the help you need. And so it will take partnership, and it will take us all creating that safe space in the schools or out in the community, in the health center or in the school, in a variety of different spaces so that we can promote that wellness among young people. I think there's so much going on. I'm a mom as well as a professional, and I look at my teenager and I worry about her and her friends. Do you have that space so that where you can feel okay saying, I don't feel good today? And I hope that as a professional in public health that I can really bring forth that message that we together need to link up and make sure that our young people have those opportunities to to get the help that they need in whatever safe space we can afford them.
Oh, Vaughn, I have to tell you that as listening to you as a mother also, but being across the table from our public health director who just has it in you as a core value to support the mental well-being of our youth, it just feels so, I'm just so full of gratitude for your leadership in this area. And before we move away from this really quickly, but ACEs screening,
Yes.
ACE, do you want to say what that is?
Adverse childhood experiences.
Great. Yes. So we screen for those.
Right, and adverse community environments. So that's the pair of ACEs, and that's incorporated into the public health strategic direction.
Great.
So we want to look at the child, but we also want to look the context of which that child or that person is experiencing life.
Great. A moment ago, too, you talked about being a mother. You have children that are not yet out of the house, but going to be there soon.
Right.
So I want to talk about the youth for a moment. And, put on your hat as the public health director and all that you've experienced. A question for you is, for our teens and youth that are graduating high school, what are some of the words of wisdom in terms of that you could impart in terms of what are the skill set that they need to be successful, whether it ends up being as a public health director or in a different career, or even the mindset that you would recommend that they hone and have discipline around?
I would, and going back to my personal experience and what I have seen as a professional, pursue the maximum education that you can obtain, whether that be consider going to your community college, consider going to a state school, consider the UCs, consider Stanford, consider Harvard, consider all the possible opportunities that are available and pursue education. And I want to say that there are a lot of young people that I have met through my career that say, I don't have a supportive family. To that I say, you know what? We can be your family, your school counselors, your teachers. That's how I got my start, through my school nurse and my AP English teacher. So they have access to that at school. They have access to mentors in the community. Give us a call in public health if needed. But I want to say my greatest really encouragement is really pause and pursue all the education that you can while you can, and then everything will fall into place. So I've also heard, in addition to, I don't have the family to support me, I don't have the money, you know what, there are a wide array of financial assistance, of loans, of grants, of low-cost schools that can really assist. And then the final is, I don't want to spend 8 years, I'll grow old, and to that I say, you know what, those years will pass anyways, and so why not knock it off, and position yourself to get the best job, to get the best life experience possible. I think that college and I think that additional education just really open up the world, open up the opportunities, and you have choices after that.
Vaughn, that is really profound. We're going to leave the show right there with your words of wisdom and advice to not only the young people, but anyone watching. And we are we all, if I can speak for the community, so grateful for your leadership. Thank you so much for imparting not only those words of wisdom, but really being an ambassador for all that you have lived through and that you've shared. Vaughn, thank you so much for
Susan.
being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.